Bourbon or rye? Definitely bourbon. What's up, guys? Sam James, barprints.co, and we're doing things a little bit differently, as you can see this time around. Instead of my usual videos where I talk about a different cocktail technique, I actually shout out a question to the Instagram community to ask, what do you want to know about me or Barprints? So I picked my top 5 questions. I'm going to go through them and give you my answers. Now, if you're new to the channel and you are looking for the best in all things bartending, cocktail, tips, tricks, tutorials, things like that, don't forget to hit the subscribe button right down here. Don't forget to click the notification bell to make sure you never miss a new video whenever they come out. Now, the first question, a question that I actually get a lot, is where did Barprints come from? And essentially, it all started like this. I've always had a passion for cocktails and hospitality industry on a whole. And at the time, I had just had my first child and I was looking for a side hustle to bring in some extra money. And one of the things that, because of my hospitality background and consulting background, I got asked a lot about was doing business plans for a bar or a restaurant. And since so many people would come to me for that, I figured maybe there's a bigger, broader market out there. So I started developing kind of like a bar business plan template, or like what I thought of as a bar blueprint. And essentially, it started with this idea of making bar business blueprints. And then, of course, that's a mouthful. So the name got condensed to bar blueprints to bar prints. And that's essentially where Barprints came from. It started out as something to help people start their own bars, and it's evolved into what it is today, where it's this huge community of people sharing recipes, ideas, and of course, ultimately the launch of our Mixology Mastery course. So that's where Barprints came from. Second question, which is one I actually get a lot of, is what's my favorite drink? And this is probably going to be super boring, because when you are a bartender or a mixologist, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate, a lot of people want to know, you can make all these cool intrinsic things. What's your favorite drink? Honestly, when I'm at home, my favorite go-to is a scotch on the rocks, a bourbon on the rocks. In this case right now, I'm drinking a bourbon. Something simple. I'm one of those people who, sure, I could do all these different things, but if I'm only doing it for me, I really kind of don't want to be bothered with it. So I always go through to something simple, something that I can enjoy, make quickly for myself. If it's for my wife, for my friends, for my family, I'll pull out all the stops. But if it's just for me, a good bottle of anything to sip on, bourbon, scotch, rum, tequila, a good bottle of anything to sip on with some great conversation, that's all I need. Now, the third question is actually another one that a lot of people tend to ask me is, how did I get into the business? And when I talk about being in the business for a long time, whether may have seen this in another video, the website, whatever, where I talk about being in the business for 20 plus years, I'm actually talking about the hospitality business. I started out in the hotel business, and funny thing about it is I actually was kind of born into it. My father, who has been in the industry for many years, has worked everywhere from Africa to the States to Jamaica, where he semi-retired because he consults to this day. Retirement lasted 3 weeks and he wasn't about that life. But I was born into it, and growing up watching him, I was about 12 or so, came to him and I was like, I want to do what you do. And he kind of took a step back, looked at me, and then, I kid you not, my father looked at me. I was like 11 or 12. He's like, have you lost your mind? And I was like, no, listen, I want to do what you do. He used to travel a lot, and he always spoke about his work so passionately. And I grew up watching him, and like most kids, I guess my father was my hero. So, or is, I should say, my hero. He's still around. Sorry, Dad. But he asked me a very simple question, and that was, how do you plan on learning this business? And I didn't even think about it, because I just kind of felt the answer come to me. I was like, I'm going to learn it from the ground up the way you did. And he just kind of sat back and said, okay. Never really spoke about it until I was in my teens and I was about to get my first job, which was working at a hotel that he was the GM of. Sadly, that hotel doesn't exist anymore. But I started out in the sales and reservations department of this hotel. And I worked there at night, and then I worked there in the day, and at night, I started learning how to bartend. But that's the short version or the long version, depending on how you look at it, of how I got into the business. Another question that I get a lot of, and it's asked here, how long have you been a professional bartender? Well, here's the thing. I am not a professional bartender, and let me qualify that. What I consider, and what many of us consider a professional bartender, is a bartender that goes day in and day out, works at a bar, is a career bartender, and that's what they do. I have not worked behind the stick in that capacity for a number of years. My career path, actually, as I learned bartending, actually the funny thing about it is I learned bartending in Jamaica, and the legal drinking age in Jamaica is 18 years old. I was about 17 when I started learning how to bartend. I learned from an amazing bartender who's a dear friend of mine to this day. At the time, he was about 2 years older than me, so he would have been about 19. He actually started doing this in Jamaica when he was like 14 or 15. So shout out to you, D, if you're watching. And he was the one who trained me. I wanted to soak up as much knowledge as I could, but I just kind of gravitated to it. So what ended up happening was I was actually in college at the time. So I came home in the summers to Jamaica to work, and I bartended while I was working at the resort in Jamaica. And I thought this would be a great way for me to make some money and get some experience when I was back in college. Problem with that is you got to be 21 years old in the States to be able to serve and consume alcohol, and Sam was only 17. So when I talk about my years of experience, training and everything like that, I wasn't always as a professional bartender. I worked in the bar, worked as a server, and after I left the bar, I kept practicing, kept reading books, kept studying. And what ended up happening is in different stages of my career, whether I was running a hotel or a lead consultant on a project for an event or whatever the case may be, I was always put in this position of either creating menus, creating cocktails, and training staff. And it led to me always giving what I called my crash course. And many of you may have seen the free PDF that I always point to at the end of my videos, the Barprints crash course. A lot of the principles kind of stemmed from there. And over the years of having to teach people quickly and having to develop new and fun things and things like that in different capacities, that's where the breadth of training and development of different bartenders and things came from. Not from me always being the one behind the stick, but after leaving there, being put into a supervisory role and guiding that process. And luckily, I had the hands-on knowledge to do it, which actually kind of endeared me to a lot of my staff, because I wasn't just some guy who went to college, got a degree, and was telling them what to do. I was actually in the trenches before, and I came back into the trenches with them again to train. So no, I'm not a professional bartender, not anymore. I consult and I have Barprints. Okay, now this is a fun question. Do you feel like do you afraid you're sounding like a fraud because you tell people you don't need bartending school, but you sell an online course? That's actually a fun question for me, and here's the reason. I do not feel like a fraud. Now, for those of you who don't know what they're talking about, the week before this video, I put out this video right here telling people why they don't need bartending school, and you can watch that after this one. Here's why I don't feel like a fraud selling an online bartending course. I mentioned in that video that all this information, there's a ton of information out there on the internet for free, so you won't necessarily have to go to a bartending school to get this stuff. But the reason why I developed this course is really for people like me who understands or who feels like, you know what, there's a ton of great information out there. I could probably go find it myself, but I really don't have the time for that. I would much rather pay a certain amount of money, have somebody who knows exactly what they're doing, tell me exactly what I need to do, and follow those steps, and that will lead me to my end goal, which in the case of the course is learning how to make amazing cocktails. Now, I liken it to going to the gym and figuring it out by yourself versus getting a personal trainer to help show you the ropes until you're strong enough to do it on your own. So that's what my program is for. If you're the kind of person who is really into this stuff and wants to have a lot of fun with it, but you don't want to spend hours on end searching the internet, and you just want a very direct path to success and results, then the course is for you. Otherwise, you found me on YouTube. YouTube is out there. Go nuts and enjoy. I'm not mad at you. Okay, next question. What was your first job in the industry? My first job in the industry was, as I think I mentioned before, I was a trainee in the sales and reservations department of this all-inclusive resort in Jamaica that, like I said, is no longer there, that my father used to run. And I'll never forget, I came home from college. I was about, like I said, 16 or 17. And I wanted to start right away. I was super excited to start. My father is always been an early riser, headed over to the office at like 7:30. We lived on property, and he says, meet me by 8 o'clock. So 8 o'clock, I'm dressed, I'm done, I'm at my father's door. 8 o'clock, I knock on his office door, and I walk into his office. I'm ready to go. He tells me to sit down. And this threw me for a loop. And when I look back on it, I will totally do this to my kids. I totally understand where he was coming from now. But my father looked me dead in the face, sat back in his chair, dead somber, and just went, "Why should I hire you?" And at first it took me back. I was like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Why should I hire you?" And I realized immediately that he wanted to see how I would handle that situation, and he wanted to know that I was serious about the job. So I proceeded to answer these questions. And my father proceeded to interview me for my first job. And luckily, after about 10 minutes of questions, then, he said, okay. And he got up from the desk and he took me to who would have been my first supervisor in the business, the sales and reservations manager, who is now, to this day, a very dear friend of mine. Shout out to you, Donna, if you're watching this. And that's how I got started in the business. And like I said, it was during this summer of me learning where I started bartending, because I wanted to learn everything I possibly could in the shortest amount of time about the business. I thought that long term I would have been in only hotels. But then, of course, as I grew older and I worked in different aspects in different areas of hospitality and tourism, I realized that there was no one size fits all, and I could do a bunch of things, whether it was consulting, whether it was working in hotels, attractions, the excursions. The sky was the limit with hospitality. But that was my first job in hospitality. And those are some of the questions that were asked by the community. I hope that you guys found them interesting or entertaining. I personally don't consider myself that interesting or entertaining a person, but I'm glad you did, and I hope that gives you a little bit of insight onto me and Barprints and how things got started. If there's anything else you'd like to know, drop it in the comments. Follow-ups to any of these questions, anything like that. If you are looking for a program, because of course this is Barprints and you may have found me searching for bartender training, you could go ahead and check out barprints.co. Check out our Mixology Mastery course. It's, like I said, completely laid out. I distilled everything I've taken in the past 20 years to train people as effectively and as quickly as possible and put it into this program. If you found this video helpful, and I really hope you have, don't forget to give it a like and share it with your friends. And for more great bartending tips, tricks, videos, etc., go ahead and check out these videos right here. Thanks a lot for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.